Welcome to the iNetrepreneur Radio Show. We are so honored to bring you your host, the ultimate celebritypreneur, connecting businesses and celebrities worldwide. Winner of the Networking Organization of the Year, best-selling author, magazine publisher, trainer, and owner and founder of Network Together and the iNetrepreneur Media Network from magazines, TV, and radio network. We're excited to bring you your host, Mr. Robert W. Jones.
Good Thursday afternoon, everyone. So great to be here with you on a Thursday afternoon. Yes, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's starting to get a little bit warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer. And like, oh yeah, I live in the land of the oven. So at any rate, welcome. I welcome you for being here. I have an amazing guest, and we are going to take the full hour. So, instead of going shallow, we're going to go deep. We're going to dive into it today. And I'm so excited because I have my good friend Marla Press here today. So please tell your friends, tell your family, tell people you love, tell people you don't even like, because they may love her instead. So please come to the show because we want you to join us. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. I just want to remind everyone that oh my goodness, it's been so incredible that we have the #1 international book, best-selling book, 365 Days of Abundance Quotes, and the Abundance Journaling books on sale at Amazon. You can go to mybook.to/Art of Connection 5. That's /Art of Connection 5. Yes, everyone who's going into the resilience, we still have that abundance book out there, and we're keeping that abundance mentality, and we want to just glow stick this book. Remember, show up, glow up, and then you'll blow up. So, of course, we're doing that with the book. Also, I want to remind everyone that the Art of Connection Virtual Summit is coming up on May 15th. It starts at 8 a.m. You can go to artofconnectionsummit.com. That's artofconnectionsummit.com. And guess what? It's virtual. So, you show up in your PJs. No, don't show up in your PJs, but you can just show up, and you can do it from a phone. You can do it from a laptop. You can do it from a desktop. We just want you there. We have some amazing guests, great speakers. We have John Verico of Share Your Fire. We have Melody Vachel with Kara Rises, and also we have Lori Osborne with Biz Bolster, and they're going to be helping people understand about writing and sharing and amplifying their voice by the use of with technology, from the inside to the outside. We also have a VIP room after the event with David Goldberg of Edge Studios out of New York City. And special guest, yes, Mark Victor Hansen's son, Preston Weeks, is going to be with us, and he's going to be sharing us 5 major awesome technologies that every entrepreneur, speaker, and author should know. So I'm really excited about that as well. So that's at the Art of Connection Virtual Global Summit. That's March. Whoa, wait a minute. Where am I at? May 15th. Starts at 8 a.m. It's until noon. And then we have a special VIP afterwards for all authors that are in the Art of Connection book series. So, hey, there's no price to that. Just get a page and come with us. Your contribution will be in our journal and our quote book. Plus, you'll get a digital calendar on top of that for 2026. Go to Facebook. We love your likes. Yeah, I love saying that. We love your likes. Let me go back. We love your likes. I'm having a good time here. I'm just hanging out. We love your likes. Go to Facebook at facebook.com/iNetrepreneur Radio, or go to YouTube at youtube.com/iNetrepreneur Radio. And yes, I'll say this each and every week. I know it's hard to spell, but if you spell it once and you spell it right, all you have to do is bookmark it after that. Also, we have our magazines. Yes, we're a full service publishing company. Our publishing company is called iNet Publishing. So you can go to iNetRepreneurMagazine.com or the Contemporary Woman magazine to see 2 of our magazines, but we also have 2 more magazines coming out. One of them will be the Art of Connection magazine, and also we have Infinite Core Living. So I'm just really excited. We have so many things going on. Also, please don't forget, if you want to go to one of our over 800 meetings and events per year that we put on at Network Together in the iNetrepreneur Network, you can go to ntevents.net. That's NT, events.net. So we'd love to see you there. And so I am ready for it. She's ready for it. You're ready for it. We all scream for ice cream, and I'm going to breed on my guest today. We're going to take a full hour, and we aren't going shallow. We definitely are going deep, and I'm breeding on Marla Press. Hello, Marla.
Hello, Robert. Oh my gosh. Everyone needs to just hit replay and watch what you just said 5 times because there was so much there. There's no way you could get it all in one hearing. So yeah, replay it, write it down, take the notes. There's so many opportunities here. It's amazing what you have to offer.
And I want to thank you so much for that. And everyone who's out there in transcribe land, I'm with Marla Press. She's founder of Speakers on Fire Academy. You can contact her at m.press@marlapress.com. That's M, the dot right there in between, press at marlapress.com. Or, she's so brave, you can call her at 720-352-2950. And again, that's 720-352-2950. And Marla, I just, I said this to you, and we were in New York, and we went to DC. We went on the train, which was a blast. I never thought, being in a train could be so much fun, but I was like, what? Now I know, what Sheldon knows from Big Bang Theory. Trains can be cool. And then, we went there, and then we went to New York City, and I was able to see you speak, and and I told you it then, and I'll tell you now again. I have this one curriculum that I have, and so it's a class I teach, and the class is called "Be the Speaker That Everyone Wants." Be the speaker that everyone wants. And you and I both know, in this industry, there are good speakers and there are great speakers, and then there's speakers that everyone wants. And there's a difference between each one of those, because speakers that everyone wants are the ones that us event planners always go to, if something is amiss. And what I mean by that is sometimes someone is sick, or someone misses a plane, or someone is not able to attend because of family reasons. And what I say is, be the speaker that everyone wants, is because that's fill-in time. And that has happened to me, certainly more than one time in the time that I have planned events. And you want to be that speaker that everyone wants, is because sometimes, and most of the time, Marla, you can get on my stage and not even pay to play, and it's because you're the speaker that we know that will provide the right content, that will, include the audience and create valuable impact that takes everyone with them. And I think many times that speakers don't understand that, when you are on stage, it's not just in front of your audience, it's also in front of the people who want to put you on stage. And never underestimate the power of the event planner. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, you've said so many great things there. So yes. Lastly, that you never know who's watching, right? Whether you're on social media or you're on a stage, you never know who's watching. So always be on, right? Because yes, if you want to be asked back, if you want to be asked in the first place, if you want to be visible, you want to be found, then you want to show up every time. And I
totally agree.
Yeah, I also love what you're saying about be the speaker that everybody wants, because we can take that another way too. And that is, too many speakers make the mistake of speaking about just what they want to speak about, just what they want to say. And what we have to really reframe that as, what does my audience want to hear? It's not about me. It's not about even my story, right? Even though I'm going to tell my stories. But what about that does the audience need to hear? And that's what makes a great speaker from a pretty good speaker, is knowing what is the most important thing to say, and not just, what do I want to say? What experience and expertise do I have? Yeah, that's so important.
Well, and I think that one of the biggest important things that I see in every speaker who really wants to be a part of their audience is, some people say, well, talk to a person in the audience like you're talking to the whole audience. I've never, you know, and I really want to get your opinion on this. I've never been a really big believer of that. You know, I believe once you start becoming a very seasoned speaker, you actually bond to the audience as it is a collective that turns into an avatar of everyone that's in that audience. And so when you're speaking to them, you're really speaking them to, you know, the greater whole of everyone, you know, not that one person. Because to me, it's like if you're speaking to the one person, you know, in many ways, you're kind of discounting everyone else that's in that room. And so for me, I believe that we speak to the entrainment of the environment of those that are in that audience. And I would love to get your take on that.
Yeah, that is such a great question and such a great observance, because to me, it's almost an art of the combination of the two of those, right? Because I often tell speakers, you know, what we used to say is, you know, look above everybody's eyes and see the whole room at once and look around and make sure you're looking around. But that makes nobody feel like you're speaking to them. So I do say, make eye contact with one person at a time and don't move on to the next person until it lands. And then everybody feels that connection and feels like you're speaking to them. However, you're so right that you don't want to just, if your energy, I'm all about energy. If your energy, yeah, because that's what communication is. If your energy is as if you're just speaking to one person, it won't feel as inclusive. Mm-hmm. So you want to balance that feeling like you're speaking to one person to feeling like you are speaking to the collective consciousness, the collection of everyone in the audience. And it is an avatar. So that's a brilliant question that no one's ever brought up before, Robert. You're brilliant.
Well, thank you for that. Well, you know, and it's one of the things that I notice, because, you know, my thing is like, you know, my goal is not to touch a person in the room. My goal is to in some way be able to inspire and touch everyone in that room. Yeah. And if I don't take into the effect the entirety of that moment, then I will only have broken pieces that I'm able to state to those that hear me. And I'm so much about like, you know, in what way can I be the, you know, and here's the thing, you know, I believe that listening is a powerful concept. You know, those who listen, glisten, you know, but I also believe that, you know, you also have to have the, you know, they always say you have two eyes and one mouth. But I always say, you know, you also have two eyes and not one. And one of the things is when you're in front of that audience, you know, you need to use those eyes, because it's not just the words. And yes, it's the energy, but it's the way that the audience sways with the motion of what you're doing up there. And it includes those words. You know, and that's something that you do too. You know, to me, you create a song and dance, and you're in that room to make sure that everyone feels like they're a part of the lesson. You know, where did you learn that? And how does that inspire you to be your best speaker?
Yeah, that is amazing, because I think a lot of speakers miss out on this because they're so into what they're going to say, remembering what they're going to say, how do they look, how are they coming off, all of those things. And they're not enough of just, you know, we're all in this together. And that's what makes an exceptional speaker, is knowing how to really engage the audience. And as you know, as I spoke in New York, it's all about how do you engage the audience? Let's get engaged was the title of my talk, because you want to make it an experience and not just a talk. You want to involve everyone. And I didn't used to be good at it.
Involvement is so important to everyone that's in that room. And I see that you do that, you know, especially with movement, you know, and, you know, so you do that with movement, you do that with color, you do that with what I call wearing your feather. And, you know, for me, your feather is very much, you utilize the color red. And so it's a very symbolic piece of who you are and how you convey yourself to others. And when I used to manage Chanel boutiques, and I still remember when I was going through Chanel training, you know, Coco Chanel always talked about, you know, every person in life has their own feather, and, similar to like they have their own gifts. But, everyone may have similar gifts, but no one has the same feather. And I think that that's the same thing with speakers too, is when you train and when you learn, it's not about, trying to make them go through a coaching program that makes everyone similar. It's actually trying to get them through a program so they can all find their feather, and that feather will help them create their access of success. And I just, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not putting any other programs down, but I'm not a big fan of a lot of either the Toastmasters. They help a lot of people. So I would never put them down at all. That's not my point. But my style is very, very individualized and bringing out the best of that person. And I have this exercise I do with people that we focus on their speaking persona, because we all have a speaking persona. And some people, it's not really authentic, because people go out and they want to be the authority. They want to be seen as the expert and competent, right? And confident. And so they're not themselves. And they go out there and they speak and they're subduing parts of themselves. And that makes them not only less interesting, but people aren't just going to connect to them as much. So I teach people how to connect to all those parts of yourself that can be part of your speaking persona. So it's not about being like someone else. It's not about not being yourself, but it's about expressing more of yourself. So you really bring that out. So that's a big piece of it. But I also, I have elements I suggest for your talks and for social media and those things. But I don't have a formula that everybody has to follow. I have choices, when it comes to doing your pitch. If you're going to be in a networking group, how could you, have a couple different ways of doing it? I have probably half a dozen instead of just one way. And I think that is really important to make it individualized.
And a lot of this, and Marla, this is that's really cool too, is, when I speak to people, because like I said, I'm not in life to be a public speaker. What I'm in life to do is to work with others to illuminate their light. And that's what I do. And I think it's so important in the power of what you're saying, the power of presence, the power of being someone who's engaged, not just when they're on their stage, like you said, but the before and the after. But I also think that there's the power of and it's something that a lot of speaking coaches really don't understand. It's not that you're trying to create them, just in a better self. What you're really, in my opinion, should be doing as a speaker coach is to give them the power of and. It means their personality was like at in this space, but as you work with them, their personality just expands and expands and expands, so they can be more inclusive of every audience that they get to perform in front of. Because to me, public speaking isn't just about the content, it's about the performance, isn't it?
It's all about the performance. I mean, communication's only 7 to 10% the words you say. And words are very powerful, very important, and I help people a lot with content. But communication is 20% your tone and a whopping 70% your energy. And energy is body language, it's facial expression, especially on Zoom or on StreamYard. And it's also your passion, your confidence, and this thing we can't really explain. That's, we know of it as chemistry, or we know of it as this, thing we can't put into words that we're always affected by with other people. You meet somebody and they may say normal things or things that sound pretty good, but you just don't trust them. And that's a feeling or the energy that comes from them that you pick up on consciously or subconsciously. And then other people, maybe you met your wife this way.
I totally agree with that. And, it's really funny that you're talking about that, because one of the things that, I see is I call that, great speakers know how to create molecule movement. And what that means is in molecule movement is, to me, that is a variation of what you call the it factor. That you connect with them so much, it seems like, like even mitochondria within their body starts to dance and move in a vibration and frequency that is exciting in a very proper and a very purposeful way, and some of the things which are really interesting to me is, speaking is a science, not just an art form. And if you understand the science and then you practice the art form of it, you can not only command a room, you can create movements from it, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the purpose, right? Is not just to give a talk or to give information. We can get information everywhere now. We're bombarded with information. What the audience now wants is an experience. They want to be moved. They want to feel something. They want to be inspired and motivated. And so you have to perform. And that doesn't mean you need to be super high energy the whole time and be, super charismatic and rah and all that. You don't have to be that.
Oh, yeah, you do. No.
Hey,
No,
a little bit of that.
yeah,
I
a little bit
agree.
of that.
I'm all about at least some of that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be that the whole time. And and some people it's just not their personality. But you think of, like the Deepak Chopras or certain people that just are mesmerizing.
Yeah.
They have this kind of quiet energy, but it's the quality of their energy. It's this, this thing that we can't explain that just makes us want to lean in and want more. And that's what you want as a speaker. But I totally agree. You have to balance this performance entertainment factor with connection and trust.
Yeah. And another thing that I think that, we're starting to hear a little bit more of, and I want to keep, advocating it, is just the power of pause, and how amazingly strong that is. Because in a world when we are constantly bombarded and it's just like, oh my God, the noise is so much. Sometimes when you want to make that point and you want to create that memory and you want to create that statement, I mean, there's nothing better than creating a space. And that space is a pause, isn't it?
Yes, pausing is so important. And people are afraid to do that because they think, oh, someone's going to think I forgot what I was going to say. But pausing, and you want to use them strategically. So I teach people to chunk your information when you're talking so that you're not just talking nonstop, but chunk it. Because number one, it will sink in better. Like you said, people, just can't take in so much. So yeah, so it'll help people take it in. It also it creates this drama. It sort of resets people's minds to, oh, I'm going to listen again because what's she going to say next? So it creates that moment also. And it helps you relax a little bit too, so that you're not running out of breath. And then next thing you know, you're
absolutely. And I've had to learn that myself because I'm one of those, I get so excited. I'm like the little dog, next to the big dog, and I keep jumping around because it's just like, oh yeah, I got my buddy with me, right? So I'm invincible. Marla, I do want to take a pause here in our talk, and I do want to go back just a little bit. And I'm always interested in one of the things is I love words, and I think that's why I write a lot of poetry. That's why I'm so involved with the art of connection. I love to know Genesis, the genesis of a word, the genesis of a concept, the genesis of, what inspired you to start, your Speakers Academy, and it's really very interesting to me because, you probably had an idea in mind and maybe it evolved into what it is now. And that's Speakers on Fire Academy. What made you say, out of all the things I could choose in life, I'm going to be very intentional and I'm going to create a space that I can be very unique in and that I love. And you chose speaking training. You chose to be in a place to inspire others and to help them tell their stories. Why this space?
Yeah. So it's been a long time building as it can be, but I've been on stages my whole life. I grew up in musical theater. I was in a dance company. I was a writer, loved to write poetry. I would write speeches and give speeches. I'd always volunteer to be the one to give the speech for the class or the organization. So I was very used to and very comfortable being on stage.
Mhm.
And I was comfortable entertaining. I wasn't good at connecting. And it wasn't until I studied the art of presence, which initially was the art of feminine presence. And
Mm.
I studied that for 4 years. And in that, there was some speaker training. And what I realized was I was really good at speaking and I loved speaking. It's funny because we had this exercise where the trainer was trying to get people to be a little more enthusiastic because people get so, number one, like we talked about, they want to be the experts, so they kind of have shut down energy. And number two, they're a little nervous and scared, so they're kind of shut down. They're not themselves. And so he was trying to say, okay, now, I want everyone to be more enthusiastic. And people would be like, this much more enthusiastic. That's it. And I went out there and I pretended I was Oprah, and I just went and you get a speaking gig, and you get a speaking gig, and I'm high-fiving everybody, and I'm thinking, this is natural for me. It's not something I have to work on, and it's fun for me. I love it. I love having creative ways of having people be more creative on Zoom. Sometimes I turn my back to people and I spin around and I do all kinds of things, and
Yeah.
it's so much fun. And so I realized that the other big part of it, which is not as fun, is that when I was growing up, I was very shut down, and I didn't speak up and advocate for myself, and I kind of had a wall up. And it wasn't until after the art of presence, and I had already done some speaking because I was a practice management consultant too for doctors around the country. And I was speaking on stages promoting my services. And again, I had great information, really good. I had standing ovations for that, but I wasn't creating enough connection and trust. I
Mm.
wasn't getting enough people to be my client because I wasn't balancing that entertainment with the connection and trust. And it took me going through this art of presence, which I'm now certified to teach at the highest level, and love, love, love it. And I bring it into my speaker coaching because it's such an important part. But that's when it all came together for me, that I also want to help people speak so they're heard,
Mm.
speak so people listen, because there's a lot of people that are trying to speak or they're holding back from speaking and they're not being heard. So that it's like a real personal thing for me to not only help you grow your business, but personally to get that growth and satisfaction and empowerment of speaking your truth.
And there's so much like psychology to this. There's so much physiology to this. There's even, I would say coming into things, you have to know a little bit of sociology, and that's where the understanding of the audience that you go to. And so many times, I think of speakers and, you know, and it's really hard for me because sometimes I hear the speakers and they say the same thing and they say it again and again and again. And for me, the one thing that they lack when they do that, when it's too canned,
Mm.
is they forget something that, people are trying to learn now. And I still think many people are ineffective in this. And that's learning, how emotional intelligence plays a role into, being someone who wants to be, found, and on the other side, who wants to be heard. And isn't that really what it's about? That the communication in the audience, like you don't train with cookie cutter, but you also have to be very schooled in the art of emotional intelligence, to be able to craft and create a message that, it's not just factual and functional, but it's also fun and inspirational, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because so my background is in psychology. That's what I went to college for and got my degree in. I love psych and I love neuroscience, and I also love behavior. And, we all have patterns that we get into, right? We all have
Mhm.
messages and hold on to limiting beliefs, at least some, if not a lot. And as a speaker, a lot of that comes out. There's imposter syndrome. There's worrying about how you look. There's the old messages of, don't be too loud, or your message isn't important, be quiet, all those things that come
Mhm.
up. So I help the speakers themselves let go of that. And there's also the whole psychology of how do you approach an audience, how do you connect to an audience, and what does the audience want. So there's that whole piece too. And we're learning a lot more about the whole psychology of, whether it's the psychology of selling or the psychology of connecting. You
Oh my
really,
gosh. You just hit me, really, really quickly. I remember when I first met Jill Lublin, and I was going in her class, and she said this one thing that really struck me, Marla, and she said, use what you have. Use what you have. And I didn't really understand it a lot when I first heard it, because one of the things that I was always very, it wasn't maybe how I looked when I was up on stage. I didn't really worry about what I was going to say that much, none of that. My thing was always, I hate my voice. I can't stand my voice. It's not the voice that, I felt like everyone should hear. And then one day, you know, her voice went into my head, because all of a sudden, I was on the phone, and I said, "Hey, this is Robert Jones, and I'm calling from Network Together. I just wanted to thank you for coming to our event, and because I like to do some spot calls like that." And they go, "Oh, I know who you are." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know who I am?" And they're like, "Because you're Robert Jones." And I'm like, "But how do you know that?" And they said, "Because of my voice." And that's when it kind of struck me with what Jill was saying. Use what you have. Because although I may hear my voice and I may think, well, it's not a it's not a voice for radio or television or stage or all these things that I'm thinking that I just have to be a certain way, right? Because we're groomed to be a certain way.
yes.
But at the end of the day, no one remembers their name, but they remember mine, because I use what I have. What is it in us? What is it that you have to break through to get people to say, you know what? It's not about what you look like. It's not about what you sound like. It's not about where you come from. It's about using what you have. That to me is like one of the biggest breakthroughs a speaker can make, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really important. And most people by far don't like the voice. They don't like the way they sound. It's almost everybody. They go, "Oh, I heard, when we used to do voicemails, right? And
Yeah.
we're not calling people as much anymore, but when we used to leave voicemails, people go, "Oh, I hate the way I sound." That's so common. And that's just because you sound different in your head when you hear yourself talk than when you record yourself.
Right.
But one is not better than the other. They're both you. And it's okay. I mean, people love quirkiness and personality. They don't want cookie cutter.
Mm.
So it's really important to be yourself, whether that's the way you look, your voice, your words, your humor, all of that. It's really important to just, take a deep dive into who you are. And I help people through exercises, because I find most people talking about these things, they don't really transform. They kind of get it intellectually, but that's not the same as changing behavior. And so I
Mm.
take people through exercises to bypass that critical mind and really get in their body and understand, how to let go of these beliefs, and how you are not your beliefs. You're this essence that's inside of you. And when you connect to that, you're more authentic and you're more appreciative of who you are.
You know, which reminds me, because for a lot of us, you know, especially when speakers are new in the industry and they're just coming in, one of the things, you know, that we know, you and I both know, we call it nervous energy. And nervous energy sometimes can really be a killer for those who are really trying to gain, how would I say, an engagement, you know, a rapport, a bond with their audience. You know, are there ways that you know of to help speakers just, you know, work with that nervous energy and turn it from a weakness into a strength?
Yes. And what I don't do, I've heard other coaches say, well, your mind doesn't know the difference between excitement and anxiety. So just tell yourself you're excited. I don't believe in that, because
Mm,
we are more than our physiology. Physiologically, like you look on a functional MRI, your brain might light up in
yeah.
the same places, but our minds are more comprehensive than that. We know the difference between excitement and anxiety. So instead, I have people work through it, and I have exercises. Again, it's all about doing the exercises and the work, but the exercises to get out of this head energy, because that's where we get really nervous, is up here, because we're thinking, we're worried, we're thinking about what's going to happen. And then a lot of times people's, throats get real dry, or even they get a lump in their throat, or their chest gets real red. You've seen that. It's because your energy is all up here. So when you
Mm,
know how to spread your energy out through your whole body, because you have this whole body, you're not this, you know.
yeah, you're right.
And
Right.
when you can experience how to get really grounded, and I take
Mm.
people through an exercise to get grounded, and maybe only takes 10 minutes, and you practice it, and then before you speak you could probably do it within 30 seconds, and it's so helpful. But
Oh my
don't try,
gosh.
don't try and talk yourself out of it, because it works a little bit, but it's not the whole answer.
Oh, I love that. Everyone, I am with Marla Press. She's amazing. Love her to death. She's the founder of Speakers on Fire Academy. You can contact her at m.press@marlapress.com. Again, this is Marla Press. She's founder at Speakers on Fire Academy. Get that fire, people. Get that fire. You can contact her at m.press@marlapress.com or call 720-352-2950. Marla, we're just going to get take a little break here, and I'm going to play a little commercial. Then I'm going to bring you back on, and I'm going to grill you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to bring you back on, and
Let's get
let's
fired up.
continue our.
Fire up that grill.
That's right. Fire up the grill. And so I'll see you back in about a minute and 1 second.
Okay.
All right, everyone. Again, I'm with Marla Press. She's founder of Speakers on Fire Academy. You can contact her at m.press@marlapress.com or call 720-352-2950. And let me tell you, we've been talking about so many things so far, everyone. And if you missed this part of the show, now we're going to dive in some other things. And, and what I want to dive into, Marla, is, so much of the time when we talk about speaking, we talk about the stage part, and I tell people it's, I used to be a caterer, and people used to come up to me and they would say, oh my goodness, you're a caterer. What a cool job. I'm dressed up. I look great. My food looks good. My staff is, doing their thing. And, and in my mind, I'm thinking, like, you don't know, like, the 20 to 30 hours it took to get to the point of being here for these 4 hours. And you don't know what it's like for the additional 8 to 12 hours, to bring everything back out, to stock it back, to put it away, but there's always a setup. There's always a breakdown. And that stage time is really about this large of the part of the overall process of being a speaker. And that's one of the things that I never really get to hear, on most shows is, the dirt work, makes the bright lights, and there's a certain amount of foundation. There's a certain amount of ground grinding. There's a certain amount of practice. There's a certain amount of, really being skilled in your trade. And you gotta, and a lot of it is practice. A lot of it is, could be in front of the mirror. A lot of it could be in front of your dog or cat. But, at the end of the day, it's all about, creating those narratives in your mind and learning how to step outside yourself, even if you're on your own. Talk about some of the rituals, some of the habits, some of the, that gritty work that speakers do so they can be at the top of their game.
Yeah, there's a lot to being a speaker. You're absolutely right. And, part of it is the strategy of where do you speak? When do you speak? How do you find the right audience fit and all of those things? And then there's the personal work. So you need to get rest. You need to take care of your voice. You need to hydrate, all of those things. And you need to practice your talk. I encourage people to practice by getting a coach or being part of some sort of networking group where you can practice, because practicing in front of the mirror is just weird. I don't know. Maybe the dog or cat. Okay, fine. If you have, a few dogs in a little circle or something, but
I work on tail wags. Come on.
Hey, I work on tail wags. So, it's best if you have some humans, but not just your spouse or your best friend, because that's not the best audience for you to really get some feedback. But then there's also, to make sure that you are grounded. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about that, how to really stay grounded, and how to, if you're on Zoom or some online, what about your background? Yeah. Are you using a virtual background where your hands or your head's kind of disappearing in and out? Do you have a messy background? Those things are important too. If you're on a stage, are you using music? How do you have the lighting? What kind of curtain? What are you wearing? And, it's not, just about you have to look good, but you want to, all of these things speak mountains about who you are and whether you're trustworthy and whether people connect to you. So there are a lot of other things that you want to consider. And, you want to read books. You want to be informed about the news. You want to be relevant. So the way to be relevant is to research and to read. And it's really important to include some of that, especially if you're doing a lot of social media posts, that kind of thing. Really helpful to make it relevant to what's going on in the world. It could be a holiday. It doesn't have to be politics, right? It could be anything, but be relevant. Mm-hmm. And there's so many ways that you can prepare yourself. I'm doing a lot more with AI now. Yeah. And how can you use technology to make yourself a better speaker? There's a real science to that. It's not just, I'm going to, have ChatGPT write something for me. It's not that. You have to really understand the AI and how to best use it. But that can be really helpful. But there's a learning curve with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought something else up that I think is just stellar. And I really want to bring this out there. Because one of the things I think that speakers fail to understand is it's not that they fail in their pursuit of, storytelling. It's they fail in their pursuit of using the right story for the right audience. And I see that time and time again. And they've been trained. They're like, know your 5, have your 5 great talks and have your 5 great stories. And, make sure you have your 5 minutes at the end to stick the landing. There's always these, little recipes and stuff like that. But one of the things I've always felt is, yeah, be relevant and be a student of the audience that you're going to be in front of. And maybe one of those 5 stories that you learn to tell that is great, what doesn't stick with the very audience that you want to be in front of. Maybe the audience that you want to be in front of is going to stretch you a little bit. Maybe you need to go out and create a story. And I don't mean something that's fake, but like
Right.
what you said,
Sure.
it's learning something about a current event where you can create a story, that would be interesting to the very audience that you're speaking to. Tell us a little bit about the art of stelling, Stelly.
Stellar storytelling is what you were saying.
Right.
Stellar storytelling.
Yeah,
We all want to
stellar storytelling. Yeah,
we all want to be stars, so we want to have stellar storytelling.
Yeah.
So that's 3 times. That's another thing you want to practice to prepare to be a speaker is tongue twisters.
Yeah. Stellar storytelling. So she sells seashells at the seashore. So, so Marla, please. Wow. Marla, really, when it comes to storytelling,
So important.
it's not about being robotic. It's about being real, isn't it?
Yeah, storytelling is a whole art in itself, and I spend a lot of time on storytelling with speakers. And a lot of speakers think, to tell their story, it has to be this dramatic story. And it doesn't. I mean, sometimes that's appropriate, right? Depends on the audience, depends on your goal for that specific talk, your intention. But you're not always telling your personal story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all kinds of stories. There's your personal story. There's your why story, why you do what you do. There's everyday stories, like what happened with your kids, or what happened when you were driving, or at the airport.
That happens to me a lot.
Dinner.
What did happen to my kids?
Yeah, right. We can all relate to that. And if you don't have kids, at least you know about kids. If you if you haven't been to an airport recently, at least you've probably been to an airport sometime in your life. You can relate to these things: driving, having dinner, all those kinds of things that we can all relate to, exercising or not exercising, whatever it is. Everyday stories are really powerful because they're so inclusive and they can be lighthearted. You can make them humorous, and humor is a big part of how you connect with people, have them feel something. It doesn't just have to be they feel pain. How can you help people feel joy? And that motivates and inspires people to take action too. But there's, when you tell your story, here's, I'll just give 3 pointers on that, because I know we have so much to talk about. But number 1, even if it's your why story or your personal story, you want to make it about your audience. How can you make it about your audience, even though you're telling your story? Because I see a lot of speakers make that mistake. They just tell, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Here's my story. And it feels like we're a witness to your story. We might have some empathy, but we don't feel like it's our story too. So you want them to feel like it's their story too. And there's ways to do that. Number 2 is you start in the middle and use really powerful action words so that they feel like they're in the story with you as you're telling it. They're not just looking at you telling it, but they can picture it in their minds and they feel like they're in it with you. Wow. That's really important. And starting in the middle so that you start with a more exciting action as opposed to, a lot of background that they really don't need to know all that background. You think they need to know it was 10 a.m. in the morning on September 25th, but they really don't need to know that piece. That's not important. Yeah. And, and then a third is to have the emotional connection to the story. So that could be humor, or it could be pain. But whatever it is, make sure that your words, your body language, and your tone of voice are all congruent. Because I see people talk about things that were tough for them and they're smiling. And it's like, we don't trust you when you do that. It's,
Right. Did you read that from someone's magazine article? Because that I don't see that going on. Oh my gosh.
So there's a lot more to it, but those are 3 biggies that you always want to make sure that you understand.
Yeah, and again, we started off the show, and I have that class that says, be the speaker that everyone wants, and I think that that's so important. And Um, what impressed me about you is, um, you know, I like to say if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. Someone forgot the mic. The sound system is providing feedback. They didn't put the air conditioner on at time. The cake comes in and it was supposed to be 2 hours later, not right in the middle of your speaking time. I have seen it all. They forgot to put one of the legs out on the stands and someone comes up on the stage and the stage goes collapse and all.
Oh my God.
I mean, I always tell speakers, be prepared for anything to go wrong. And it may not go wrong, but don't expect for it not to go wrong, because something invariably will always happen, whether it's little and they forgot to give you your notes, or the PowerPoint's not running, or they give you the wrong flash drive to put up on the AV
Oh, that's like
behind you.
private stuff.
Yeah, and I always and I always say this: know what you're talking about so much that you don't need any notes or AV at all.
Yes.
Because if something goes wrong, there's only one thing there that keeps you from success or failure. That's you exposed in front of that audience. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I think this is so important because something will probably go wrong. It might be something small or it might be something bigger. But here's the other thing about that. Not only do you want to know your material and keep your cool and confidence, but don't try to pretend it's not happening, because I see that a lot too. They try and just sort of like not address it and hope nobody's really noticing. Yeah, we notice it. You just tripped up the stairs. But here, so here's an example too of what happened to me. So I was giving an action talk, which is like a TED talk. And, so being filmed, I get the one chance to do it. And a fly kept buzzing around my head.
Oh my gosh.
and I tried,
I only laugh because I totally get it.
Yeah. So I tried to ignore it at first, but it like was landing on my face. And so I said in the middle of my TEDish talk, I said, I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall, but I've never wanted a fly on my face. And everybody cracked up. I mean,
oh my goodness.
just like that makes you human, and it also gives you a lot of credibility, because you are being able to make fun of yourself or the situation gives you a lot of credibility and makes everybody relax. So if it's something worse than a fly on your face, same thing, just really roll with it, but also make a point of it so that everybody can relax with you, so they're not distracted by what just happened.
Oh God, I love that. And I don't know, because I know you give so much training, you give so much advice, but one point of training for me was, and I remember this and I'll never forget it. I was coached, and my coach said, I want to train you how not to speak. I'm like, what do you mean you want to train me on how not to speak? And he's like, I want you to start learning to do things that will assist in your speaking, but I don't want you to speak. And so what it really was is he said, what I want you to do is just keep living life and become a keen observer of everything that goes on around you. And it's, because if you become a keen observer of all that goes on around you, that also can be a part of what you weave into the very speaking that you do on stage. And so, so he said is like, content's only a part of it. Relatability is the other part, and many times it's even bigger. And I remember, Marla, and I hope I never told you this before, because I still remember it. I've always been a squeaky clean guy. I was a junior youth pastor. I did 2 church missions. And so I was never one that cussed. And so I remember I was going to try something different because I kept, like the young people, they do a little cussing here and they do a little cussing there. And, and I'm like, okay, today I'm going to do some cussing. And so I used the word shit. And so I said it 3 times in my talk. Did you know I never had better rave reviews than that talk? And it was because I used that word 3 times in it. And it wasn't that it had nothing to do with the content, but had everything to do with kind of, reassessing like my environment and what gets people to engage and be open. And I think it's so important to go to the baseball game, to watch a sitcom, go to a comedy club, go to a restaurant that you haven't been before, you see some theater, or even like sit in the airport on a park bench and just watch people. Yeah. I mean, if you do that, I think that your speaking acumen will go up tenfold. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you don't have a life, you're not going to be a very interesting speaker. So,
okay.
And 2 things. So one is that, yes, you, like we talked about reading and being relevant and understanding, even if you don't talk about politics, understanding what's going on in the world and just observing human behavior. And then you're going to be collecting those everyday stories that you can put into your talks that, instead of making them up, you actually have experienced them, and they're just an everyday story, but they're fascinating.
I love that. My last question, I can't believe an hour goes by like that. It just flies by, does it not? Are you kidding me?
So we need 2 hours at least.
We need 2 hours, but my big question, and I always like to end it with, for most of us, the goal isn't just to speak, the goal is to create some type of impact. And, and even if you're not looking to be a professional speaker, there's something about learning attributes and becoming a better speaker that can help you in authorship, that can help you in entrepreneurship, that can help you with relationships, and I've even found, creating a confidence and a way to engage even with your own kids or spouse.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think about when you think of speaking that, that encourages you to say, you know what, I'm not just teaching you how to become a professional speaker or a better speaker. In many ways, my role is helping you live and lead a better life.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about. That's what I love doing, is really helping people with the personal growth and making their lives better, because communication is in everything we do. It is with our partners and our kids, and it is with, our friends, and it's certainly with business partners. So even if you don't consider yourself a professional speaker, if you have a business, if it's not your business and you work on a team, you need good communication. In fact, companies are now identifying that as one of the most important skills you can have, is good communication. And it's so important. And, oh my gosh, in today's world, people are so misunderstood. We're not communicating. I did one of my action talks I was talking about, it's like a TED Talk, was about how to speak so people listen. I gave a lot of solutions on how you can speak so people hear you better. So it is, for example, telling stories or using metaphors instead of just giving your opinion, right? Because people get resistant when they hear your opinion, but you tell a story, they're not going to resist the story. They're not going to resist a metaphor. It might bypass that critical mind again and get them to listen and open up more. There's so many ways that we can communicate better with each other, and we need that in this world right now.
I couldn't agree with you more. I love that. It's so right. And communication is key. It just, to listen is to glisten. but also to be able to say the words that resonates with someone else is powerful. Everyone, I am with Marla Press. She is founder, Speakers on Fire Academy. You can contact her at m.press@marlapress.com. That's m.press. Yes, I said it here, m.press at marlapress.com, or you can call her at 720-352-2950. Again, 720-352-2950. Marla, are there any other ways that we can get a hold of you?
Yeah, so a gift that I offer that is really powerful is a hot or not so much speaker eval. And that's where you can bring any part of your message. So whether you own your business or not, just any part of your message, storytelling. Some people just want to be better storytellers. Your story, or if you have a business, your offer, and we'll see how we can give it some more spark and really help you if you are having your own business to get more clients or just be a better communicator. So it's very valuable. And this, for listening today, my gift to you. And you can find that at just speakwithmarla.com.
All right, everyone. Speak at marla.com.
Oh,
Marla.
Speak with Marla.
I'm sorry. Speak with. I don't want to cut that short. So speakwithmarla.com. Everyone, Marla, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I appreciate you. And yes, I'm going to have to expand my format because I feel like we just scratched the surface. We were just getting in it, and I could feel us really starting to get the flow. Thank you so much again for being on the show. And, like Doritos, we'll always make more, and I cannot wait to invite you back.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. It's such an important topic. So thank you for your wonderful questions and your contributions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marla.
You've been watching the iNetrepreneur Show, a production of the iNetrepreneur Radio Network with host Robert W. Jones. Join Robert each week as he visits with new and exciting guests who inspire, teach, and mentor entrepreneurs worldwide. Follow Robert each Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and 8:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time.